Check out today's piece of Otaku Daikun fan art. To be perfectly honest, this was one I had commissioned over on Twitter. It's me, looking pretty laid back and inviting. I've gotta say, the proportions are pretty interesting, kinda like how Code Geass has very tall, thin characters. That's the beauty of having different styles to draw the same characters. What sort of fan art of us will you make? Anyway, commission or otherwise, thank you Excaliblator for making this a reality. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Daichan here. Funny how I mentioned making that Daichan sketch a reality, since today's topic will again be anime and live-action cinema. Back in 2018, I made a rather comprehensive video talking about various attempts to bring anime to live action, and whether or not there's any point to doing so. I highly suggest you watch it, and I'll have it listed in the above card and at the end. But in it, I mentioned why I think Rurouni Kenshin's live actions are a brilliantly unique success that avoid the various reasons live-action anime tends to fail. Now that Rurouni Kenshin's live-action trilogy has 2 brand new entries on Netflix, the beginning and the final, I figured now would be a great time to elaborate on that part of the video specifically. Like the first 3, these new films continue to blow me away with their quality, offering an experience that I actually find superior to the manga and anime they're based on. This isn't something a filmmaker can do for just any anime, nor should they. So let's talk about why that is. I feel the main reason live-action anime fails, aside from the obvious trashy cash grabs, is because, quite obviously, anime doesn't look like reality. There's a sense of novelty involved with wanting to see your favorite anime come to life, and while there are definitely cosplay photos and the like that seem to accomplish this, that novelty quickly wears off when you try to evolve that idea into an entire movie. Put bluntly, there's a reason the original creators chose to tell their stories through anime and not live action. Anime's more exaggerated, dramatic qualities allow for an emotional intensity that can be way harder to replicate with real people and visual effects. Right from the start, the iconic large eyes of anime characters are immediately lost in adaptation, unless you're insane like James Cameron. For his blockbuster film Alita: Battle Angel, he attempted to provide a more realistic take on the large eyes of the film's protagonist. This was both an extremely costly and controversial endeavor, as creating it required facial tracking and CG remapping of Rosa Salazar's face as she played the part. This CG face would need to blend seamlessly with the real elements on screen, and initial reactions to the film's trailer indicated that Alita's large eyes were striking hard into the Uncanny Valley. Thankfully, by the actual film's release, the effects team managed to work out the kinks, namely making her irises bigger to eliminate that concern. The film is pretty damn awesome, but I really don't think modifying human faces with bigger eyes is a reliable solution. It worked in this film because Alita herself was special, a cyborg built by humans. Just imagine if they put these kinds of eyes on every person in the film. I don't think it would really appear as an anime aesthetic. Regardless, I think this proves how replicating something as basic to anime as the eyes is already an extremely expensive endeavor that should make you question why they went through the trouble when we already had a perfectly decent manga. If you're going to adapt an anime into live action, you're essentially forced to do one of 2 things. Either you break the budget on insane, world-class special effects in an attempt to match anime's dynamic visuals, or you tone down the anime's elements so they fit in line with conventional filmmaking. This applies even to anime that are completely devoid of supernatural elements. The exaggerated way anime characters act only works because their vivid facial expressions truly pair with the emotional intensity on display. A human doing the same thing just wouldn't work without being perceived as corny or fake. Even if you manage to make it fit live action, why trade more emotion for less? Once the novelty of the whole thing fades, is there ever a reason to revisit these adaptations? Aside from the nightmare that was Promised Neverland's 2nd season, is there really any reason someone should watch its live-action film over the anime? With Cowboy Bebop's live action, they're already saying they had to change Faye's outfit to be less revealing. But what are they offering to up the ante beyond an adorable corgi? If you're making compromises to fit the medium, why even bother? In short, the reason the Kenshin live actions work is because they offer an experience you can't get from the anime or its original manga. Comics, by definition, are simply unable to show motion. At best, they can represent motion through things like impact lines, dynamic poses, motion blur, and even pacing through the arrangement of panels across the page. Don't get me wrong, these techniques can make for some glorious action sequences, but at some point, we have to admit that comics aren't ideal for demonstrating choreography. It's for this exact reason that action manga have characters that sit on the sidelines during fights, commenting on what's happening. Same goes for internal monologues. Descriptive prose is necessary to fill the logical gap between panels. Details like exactly how many swings, swerves, or dodges in a battle have to be condensed. Naturally, Rurouni Kenshin's manga was adapted into an anime, but as a televised series in the 90s, it very much follows the manga verbatim. You know, with shots that are scrolling stills, panning, and zooming in on a single pose. Even the very best fights in the anime feature this. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, but it's still representative of an actual sword fight, and not a direct depiction of one. In fact, the most critically acclaimed piece of Rurouni Kenshin media is the Tsuyoku Hen OVA, released in English as the Trust and Betrayal movie. Unlike its lower-budget TV counterpart, this OVA tells the story of how Kenshin got his iconic scars. The animation is far more detailed, and the overall tone of the story is more dark and realistic than the manga or TV series. The stuff I mentioned about choreography is more or less resolved here, though it's worth mentioning that the reason this OVA looks so damn good is because it tries harder to replicate the feel of live action. In other words, the best Kenshin has ever looked in animation was when that animation was adopting more cinematic techniques. Finally, we have an intellectual property that can really benefit from the kinds of things live-action cinema specializes in. Kenshin, being a period piece and samurai action story in particular, lends itself to the specific brand of filmmaking that Japan has mastered since the onset of motion pictures. Before anime had nearly the prominence it does today, Japan had been putting out amazing samurai films. Among them, Akira Kurosawa's films are by far the most famous. Regardless of their director, though, these films capitalized on Japan's history with theater, utilizing practical stunts and dramatic posing to convey action and story. No amount of Hollywood CG could possibly replace that level of authenticity, and because swordsmanship is a martial art, it is most effective when being performed by an actual person. Admittedly, the fighting in Rurouni Kenshin isn't exactly realistic. Between different special techniques that presumably defy human ability, we certainly have to suspend our disbelief in order to appreciate it fully. To integrate these more comical or fantastical elements into live action, Japanese filmmakers can utilize another cultural tradition, tokusatsu. Similar to samurai films, tokusatsu media originated from theater such as kabuki or bunraku. It mainly specializes in kaiju films such as Godzilla and popular superhero serials like Super Sentai. In fact, Kenshin's actor, Takeru Sato, was the main character in the tokusatsu series Kamen Rider Den-O. Through acrobatic performers, practical effects such as smoke, wires, and even puppetry, Japanese filmmakers have been embracing fantasy themes in their live action as early as the 1940s. While theatrical performances on film tend to feel exaggerated or corny, these specific genres have established a cult following. Their charm is quite apparent, and even today, you can see tokusatsu films polishing their craft with modern tech. The Rurouni Kenshin live-action movies, in my opinion, are an ideal fusion between Japan's samurai period films and their flamboyant tokusatsu films. We have masterful, practical stunt work with a cinematic style that Japan has been refining since the medium first emerged. This lends the fight scenes a special performative quality that neither the TV anime nor manga could provide. As for the dramatic elements, they are told through a style of filmmaking that perfectly matches the genre, preventing the story from feeling out of place in a live-action setting. It's clearly not identical to its source, but it is appropriate. Helping this is the fact that between 5 movies now, all the most essential aspects of Kenshin's story are told. Obviously, you're not going to cram an entire 96-episode anime into that runtime without sacrifice. But like any other cinematic universe, these movies own their changes and run with them, creating a nice continuity that runs parallel to the original story. The initial film, simply titled Rurouni Kenshin, introduces us to the principal characters, while the next two films, Kyoto Inferno and The Legend Ends, tell a condensed version of the story's central plot arc, where Kenshin battles against the maniacal Makoto Shishio. The newest films that just released on Netflix serve to bookend the series. Rurouni Kenshin The Beginning is almost a shot-for-shot recreation of the first OVA I mentioned earlier. Because that OVA was heavily inspired by live-action cinema to begin with, it makes sense there wasn't too much to change, though I'll admit the changes they made are quite exciting. The last film, fittingly titled The Final, responds to the beginning, following up on Kenshin's dark past after he's found a new life and friends. Oddly enough, these newest films were released in the opposite order, and I don't really recommend watching them that way. Overall, I'd say Rurouni Kenshin in live action works on two fronts. First, it serves as a fresh perspective on the original that replaces the more inhuman elements like special attacks and giant enemies with amazing choreography. For those already familiar with the source material, it's a way to see Kenshin in a whole new light, one that I feel definitely has its merits over the anime and manga. Second, as a complete set of films that tell the core narrative, they can serve as a brilliant introduction to Rurouni Kenshin. It has the potential to draw in new audiences who may later check out the original works to see what was cut out. After all, aside from the condensed narrative, I feel the live-action version stands hand-in-hand with the original in a way that no other adaptation has been able to achieve. Though, I would like to reiterate that this method won't work for most other anime, and all of the things I mentioned in my older video on live-action anime still holds true. Thus, rather than trying to replicate that success, we're almost better off just appreciating this rare occurrence in anime history. With that, I want to wrap things up by asking you some questions. Have you seen these movies? How do you feel they do as an adaptation? Do you think any other anime have been successfully adapted into live action? If so, what makes it work? And what sort of challenges does such an adaptation face? I can't wait to hear from you all in the comments below.
Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom!